And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 96th episode recorded on Sunday, January 7th, 2024. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, and I'm joined today by a special guest from Assembly Call, Andy Bottoms. Today, we'll be breaking down your number 14 Indiana Hoosiers. I forgot to write the score down. 91-69 victory over the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The Hoosiers have now won 12 in a row, making them 13-1 overall and 4-0 in the Big Ten. And as usual, we'll start this show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Andy, for me, I'm going to go back into the first quarter here, and Sydney Parrish just remained on fire, especially in first quarter play, but she started out again today. 5 for 5 from deep, and really kind of kickstarted this team into a lead that they really never relinquished. And along with that, I heard along the postgame with the interview that 14 threes made on the road sets a school record today. So kind of a combo banner moment here. Sydney Parrish and the 14 by the team as a whole to set a road record. So our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call and Crimson Cast. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get your quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, that's HOM23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is Home Field Apparel. Wear one for the team. All right, and we're going to kick it over to Andy for the bottoms line about today's game.
I just thought so many things about this game are just the hallmarks of a really good team in a road environment, in a game against I think that the final score is probably not fitting of how good Nebraska may end up being in the long run. It doesn't mean they're going to be top 4 in the Big Ten, but I think they're a decent team. And, to win on the road, you got to get off to a hot start. You touched on that. And the other thing is you got to respond whenever the other team makes a run. And that was, to me, what stood out as much as anything during this game. Every time Nebraska would make a little bit of a push, IU would just rip off 5 points in a row and push the lead right back out. And eventually it just kind of wore Nebraska down. And ultimately, one of those stretches came for me, Nebraska. I think they had cut it to 7. I think that was as low as it got in the second half, 55-48, if my notes are correct. And then Sarah Scalia, I think, hits a 3 right away. Chloe gets a steal and a layup. You push it right back up to 12, and it was never really, I don't think it got under 10 at that point from there. But that was, one situation. But I just thought over and over and over again, Nebraska would make a play, IU would come down and hit a 3. Nebraska would make a play, IU'd come get the ball into McKenzie or somebody else would get a layup. And that's just so important in these games to really not give the other team that belief that they could beat IU. And I think that's a sign of a veteran team, for one, and a really good one at that. So that was what stood out to me.
Yeah, and Andy, will you talk a little bit about this? And obviously, I've been on with you guys a few times on the Assembly Call over the years, and just kind of that you talk about, and I'm not trying to necessarily compare the two programs, but today you felt like you saw a team that went on the road with a purpose and a plan.
100%. Yeah, I find myself every time I'm on with you guys talking about like the not necessarily in like style of play, although you could make that argument as well, but just from like a program identity standpoint, like what the women's team has, what the men's team needs to aspire to, and that just absolute belief and trust in what they were doing. And even early, it was just kind of like gradually chipping away. It wasn't a huge run. There were some of those in the game, but even in the beginning, as they built the lead, it was just kind of workmanlike. Getting through, getting the ball inside, kicking it back out to get open threes. And I just, that to me, they didn't really build that through explosiveness, even though those things came later. And Sydney at the beginning certainly fits in that category, but just kind of methodically built up the lead, super consistent, scored at least, 20 points in every quarter, always between 22 and 27, and just kind of just gradually built the lead up. And I think that, again, speaks to the mentality. The crowd got loud during that stretch that I mentioned. and they just shut them right up immediately. The three from Scalia just shut them right up, and then everything from there was smooth sailing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the crowd, Andy. I thought, again, the hot start did a great job of really kind of keeping the crowd from getting into it. The box score did not have a crowd attendance listed yet, so when I printed it off after the game. But from our friend Kathy Amos, who was actually at the game today, and Kathy may hop on here with us if she gets the opportunity for a few minutes. But there were times where she was texting with us that she was talking about the crowds trying to get loud. And again, on the road, that can really steamroll on you pretty quickly. And again, I thought that really came down to solid play. And I don't want to get too much into the numbers with this. And Ari, thank you for hitting us in the workaholics here. They said on the broadcast, I missed that the crowd was over 9,000 at Nebraska today. So another excellent crowd there. So Andy, I'm going to kind of throw it back to you here. And you kind of mentioned one segment already of that pivotal play. I want to kind of piggyback off that a little bit. And on that play that Chloe Moore McNeil made, that to me, there was, and I want your opinion on this, I thought just some great court awareness and IQ there, because Nebraska had basically run that same play right before that and kind of got Lily caught up in the screen, and the player hit the three. Well, Chloe recognized it and saw Lily was getting hung up again, and she jumped that passing lane, and that became the pick six, for the layup. But I just kind of wanted to, just kind of as you watch this team, just again, awareness and IQ on the court, just really kind of, you see it come through the screen, don't you?
Yeah, I saw the same thing where they kept running that action, and that's, I mean, what anybody should be doing, right? You see something that works, just go back to it a couple times, and they were putting some of the defenders in conflict in terms of trying to figure out, which shooter to get out to, and things like that. And they did get some open looks that way. I think if anything that you want to nitpick on a game like this, I thought they did give up some easy baskets inside a lot of times, and they gave up some open looks to 3-point shooters, some of which was probably by design based on scouting reports and things like that. But yeah, there's such a smart play by Chloe, who, the person on Nebraska is turning around at the top of the key to throw the pass, and they're not really looking. They're just assuming that the person on the wing is going to be open like they had been the previous couple of times. And I'm sure it was one of those oh crap moments as you start to let the ball go as you turn around, because Chloe was shooting the gap right away. And just a super smart play by a really good defender and a really smart player.
Yeah. So we're going to throw it back to Andy. And Andy, any other pivotal plays for you?
There was a stretch toward the end of the third quarter when they really blew the game open. I thought Mackenzie Holmes just really caught fire during a stretch toward the end. I think she had 7 straight points, which was really right on the heels, I believe, of that of the Chloe layup that we just talked about. Nebraska turns it over, Mackenzie scores again, and then she scores the next possession. Then she misses, gets her own rebound, and gets fouled. And then, Nebraska knocks the rebound out of bounds the next time, and she scores again and has 7 straight. That was, I think, the last points of a 12-0 run that got it up to 21, I believe, at the time. And I mentioned that stretch just because she really stuck with it, even though had some issues with turnovers in the first half, got called for traveling 2 or 3 times. It felt to me, although curious to get your thoughts, I don't know there was anything Nebraska was doing defensively. I think she was just trying to go too fast in some of the scenarios. But really in the second half, kind of simplified. A lot of these times her footwork is so good and her post moves are so good, she's doing, multiple moves to get a shot. I thought during the stretch in the second half, she just simplified it. It was one move and I'm going to score. It almost overcomplicated things for herself, I think, in the first half at times, trying to fight through and do things there. But I thought, that stretch from her was really big. Her effort level, just getting to loose balls and things like that in that third quarter, were really, really impressive. Obviously, the numbers speak for themselves over the course of the game in total with 22 points, but just thought really did a lot of that damage in the third quarter and really played incredibly well there. I think she had 11 of those points, so half of her points came in the third quarter. Just thought that stretch at the end of the third really put away any hope that Nebraska had at that point, and kind of showed why she's an All-American.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think there are times when Mackenzie is she's getting the happy feed, but it's more because she's trying to get to a second or third type move fake before, while the defenders almost still catch up to the first one. It reminds me of a kid I went to high school with, and we played pickup ball with, and we played against each other in practice, and he was quicker than me. And I would, he was one of those kind of, he'd make a move to fake me, but then he'd go to the second move so quick, I was still catching up to the first move that I was actually ready for the where he was getting to. So, but yeah, I thought Mackenzie did a great job. I thought just that whole third quarter, and we talked about the start again because of the fast start, but that third quarter, from that point on, where it was 50, as you pointed out, 55-48, they went on basically a 19 to 1 run, I believe, over the last part of that, from, if you extend that on out. So that's really a heck of a run there. I'm really going to go to another one, and I'm not trying to make it sound like Nebraska wins the game if this doesn't happen, but it was a huge moment, and that was early in the third quarter where they played with fire. They left Alexis Markowski on the floor with 3 fouls, and Indiana went right back into Mac. And I thought that was a great. Maybe they did make it, but it sure seemed like the emphasis at halftime was, we're going to pound it inside to McKenzie, because the first 3-4 possessions in the second half was pounded into Mac, and they got the 4th foul on Alexis Markowski, who was giving us some fits. She was already in double digits and playing pretty well. But you take an all Big Ten caliber player like Alexis Markowski off the floor, and I thought that was a pivotal play. And again, maybe luck, maybe a break, we'll take it. But that 4th foul on Markowski really, I thought, set the tone for the rest of the game, because it really took away who was the best player for Nebraska. But it also, I think, allowed McKenzie to thrive inside. And I also thought one thing in that stretch, I was a little surprised, but it looked like Nebraska and Indiana both were just determined. They really weren't going to double team either post player, Markowski or Holmes. They were going to try and play it straight up one-on-one. And after Markowski went out, they couldn't guard McKenzie one-on-one.
Yeah, it was interesting, because I made note of when she got her second foul toward the end of the second quarter, IU didn't really take advantage of that at all. It seemed like they had chances, but they turned the ball over a couple of times. And outside of the basket from McKenzie right before the half, they really didn't score at all after she went out. Now, she was only out for a couple minutes, but kind of played into a stalemate. But that definitely was not the case in the third quarter, as she gets that 4th foul pretty quickly. And really both fouls kind of the same thing, trying to kind of get one arm wrapped around McKenzie, trying to go around the other way to knock the pass away, as opposed to just trying to stay behind her and push her out a little bit on the court. And she was definitely the one that was giving IU fits for a huge stretch. And I think when she went out, it was IU was still up a decent amount, but it really took so much away from what Nebraska could have done to try to get back in the game. And so, I thought that was a good one as well. Only other one that I had was, and it kind of speaks to Markowski a little bit as well. I thought Lily Meister came in the first quarter, maybe it was the second, and did her. I think it was the first. I'm trying to see where I noted it. I thought she did a really good job defending her. Really pushed her out, made her uncomfortable. She gave up a tough hook shot, but otherwise I thought played really good, really good defense on her. She was a recipient of some nice passes from Lexi for sure. And was able to finish a little bit around the basket, but I thought she, just continued her development, and maybe a small thing just in terms of not giving up a lot of points to Markowski, but was able to really have things not drop off dramatically on the defensive end when McKenzie went out in the first half and slowed her down a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you. And once you kind of get to this 91-69 final, really not too many pivotal plays that I want to bring up, and without mentioning some numbers, I'll still kind of save those. But it does. What's pivotal about this is it puts IU at 4-0. Now, we don't want to overlook a Penn State game on Wednesday night in Simon Scott Assembly Hall, but it should set up a clash in Iowa City next Saturday night, nationally televised on Fox. That will be at least for will be for the lead in the Big Ten here, kind of almost at the halfway point of the season. So a pivotal win. That's the other thing, Andy. And I know, we're talking with you when you've been on with us. Nebraska is not the easiest place to play on the road. That crowd can get behind them, and they can play well there, and very similar to the men when they get on a roll. So I thought for Indiana go in there and get a 22-point win on the road against a pretty good Nebraska team, I think that's a pretty, and again, I don't watch every game, but I'm not sure there's too many better true road wins by a women's team in the country this year so far.
Yeah, and I definitely don't follow other teams well enough to speak to that exactly, but it is a hard place to play. Nebraska had been a good team, coming into the game, and it just really felt like IU was able to take him out of it quickly. And I think you'll find, at the very least, Nebraska will be a top, certainly a top half Big Ten team, potentially even better than that. So I think you look at what they've been able to do. Their losses had come, to Creighton, to TCU on the road by single digits, and then they lost at Kansas by quite a bit. But otherwise, had acquitted themselves well, beat Maryland at home. So I think they are a team that is going to give people fits. It's not going to be a gimme game for other Big Ten teams to go into. And so, as you said, to be able to pick up that road win, give yourself some confidence of what you can do on the road. The Penn State game is one to, you don't want to look past it. I think the good thing about that is, one, it's a veteran team that probably is less susceptible to those kinds of things. And two, it's at home. So you hope that you just take care of business there and be ready for Iowa on Saturday, but that'll be a huge one for sure.
So, Andy, I'm going to throw it right back to you. Kind of notable numbers here. We kind of stick with team overall numbers since we tend to talk about individuals in the game ball and the hustle awards, but any team numbers kind of jump out at you?
I mean, the 3-point shooting goes without saying that jumps out as you look there. 14 of 23, shooting 61% from there, and a really, they're not forcing 3-pointers and taking bad shots. It's not reasonable to expect them to shoot 60% from 3-point range every game. I'm not saying that. But the types of looks that they're getting from three and that they got in this game in particular are ones that you're completely happy with them taking. It was a couple of times that Nebraska just kind of looked at Sarah Scalia and let her shoot. I'm thinking, what are you doing? I'm happy to let them do it, but some of that kind of stuff but they're getting kickouts and they're finding open shooters. That was where Parrish got a lot of hers. And so the types of 3-point shots they're getting are sustainable. Whether they can continue to make them at that clip, we'll see. But I think they're a good enough shooting team where, that reality is you're not going to shoot 60%, but you're going to, be able to do some damage there. So I thought that was important. I thought points off turnovers, they did a nice job. Forced 19 turnovers, got 24 points off of that to give a little bit of an edge there. And then 22 assists on 34 makes is always a good number as well. And defensive activity level, as we often talk about on the men's team, looking at blocks and steals, 2 blocks, 7 steals. A reasonably good number. Speaks a little bit to the defensive effort. Although, like I said, I think if you want to nitpick anything in this game, it's probably some of the easy baskets that they gave up.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of go into the one thing we talked about in the preview with the preview in Nebraska the other night after the Michigan and the Michigan postgame show. Nebraska was plus 11 in rebounding margin coming into today, and IU wins that battle. IU's not a very good. Let me rephrase that. Their rebound margin is not outstanding. They are a little bit about middle of the league on rebounding margin, but there have been several games where they've given up double-digit offensive rebounds, and they did again today. You talk about some of the easy buckets. The 10 offensive rebounds by Nebraska stands out a little bit. But if you would have told me yesterday that IU was going to be even or win the rebounding battle overall, I would have felt pretty good about the outcome. I wouldn't have thought maybe 22-point win, but I would have felt pretty good about the outcome. Another thing I want to point out, and we talk about a little bit about style and kind of the pace. IU was 8-0 in fast break points, so they were able to take advantage of getting out in transition a little bit more than Nebraska was, and some of that was again off those steals that you talked about as well. Anything else on the numbers you want to dig into?
Just to piggyback on what you said with the fast break points. I mean, you saw this is not atypical of them, but Terry Moore really encouraging them to try to get the ball up the floor early on in the game, and that leads to some of those open looks that they get. I mean, that fast break points only ended up being 8-0, but you at least push the pace, get into a little bit of a scramble situation, and be able to do some things there. Only other thing I'd call out, 37 minutes and 50 seconds is the time that IU led in the game. So if you want to talk about, really coming in, jumping out to the lead, never, relinquishing the lead for 56 seconds is all that they trailed by. Just, I think, speaks to the completeness of the performance and, how well they were able to play throughout, never really gave up a huge run one way or the other.
And Andy, I'll go to one other one. I think that, again, I hate to sound like I'm nitpicking, but we've talked about this a few times on the show, and we kind of did this with a segment with Kathy a couple episodes ago. But they only shot 64% at the free throw line. Now they were 9 for 14, but still 64%. So that has been one place that's been a little bit of a struggle. They came into today averaging right around 70% on the season, but that still puts them down around 11th or 10th in the league in terms of free throw percentage. And I just think that's one of those that they've got to find a way to get up a little bit better. If they can get to 75, maybe they won't get there as a team, but if they can get to where they're shooting 75% per game, that makes it a little bit easier. I just got a feeling there's going to be a game or so when we come down the stretch here that we're going to come back in here in a post-game show and be free throws, cost us a possible win.
Yeah, and Mackenzie I think split both of the times that she was at the line. Lily split hers, and then Sarah missed 2 in a row, which was
Yeah.
fairly shocking. I was taking notes, and I basically had already written down. I felt like that she made as in a way that she made them, so maybe that's on me. But yeah, I would agree. I think you want to see that to be a little bit better if you can, but one of those rolls in and it's 10 of 14, maybe we don't think it's as big of a deal. So
True.
Who knows?
That's true. So any other numbers you want to talk about?
Not from a team perspective. I know there's lots of individual stuff to get to, but team wise, I wouldn't say so.
I'm with you. So let's go ahead and let's talk about hand out game ball here. And we'll throw on the ticker here for those of you who are watching on the live YouTube feed. And right now, coming into today, Mackenzie Holmes leads the game balls with 5, Sarah Scalia with 4, Yarden Garzone with 3, and Sydney Parrish has 1. So Andy, you're our guest. You're going to get to go first on the game ball.
I mean, lots of worthy candidates. When you had 4 players who all scored at least 16 points, I think you get that suggests you've got a number of worthy candidates. I know Kathy texted us that it's always a good problem to have when there's multiple. I'm going to go with Sydney Parrish just for setting the tone and getting off to such a good start. Certainly could see arguments to be made for others, but she ends up with 20 points, 6 rebounds, 6 of 7 from 3. The first quarter numbers that they put up for her over the last couple of games were just absurd. People would be happy to have that for like a 3-game or 4-game stretch, let alone just what she's done in the first quarter of some of these games. So, only 1 turnover from her, had a block, had a steal, plus 25 in 28 minutes is pretty darn good. So I'll give mine to Sydney Parrish.
Yeah, and you mentioned, there's other word that you look at. We kind of mentioned it with Sarah Scalia. She missed 2 free throws, which somebody here, I think it was Eagle Eye. Maybe I lost it. Quang, sorry, give credit. Quang points out it's the first time she's missed 2 free throws ever. I don't know if he meant in a row or in a game or what, but it's still either way. That's a pretty significant stat. But you look
no
at
matter
Sarah,
what, I believe it. So I think that you could. It's 2 in whatever span, and I would believe that.
Yeah,
it's a rarity.
Yeah, so Sarah, 19 points. She was 5 of 10 from deep. She also had 6 rebounds, handed out 7 assists, had 2 steals. You also look at, and we talked a little bit, Mackenzie Holmes, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals. But I'm with you. I just felt like on a game on the road, the person who got us off to the fast start, kind of set the tone, the pace with it was Sydney Parrish. And so we're going to give Sydney Parrish the game ball award here, because again, with everything Andy said, I totally agree with, but I thought we also needed to make sure we mentioned some others as well here about the game ball who could have been possible candidates. So Sydney Parrish will get her another game ball, and that will bring her up to 2 for the season. And then we're going to also move on to the Grace Berger Hardest Worker Award. And again, we're going to let Andy go first on that, but real quick, Sydney Parrish has 4, Mackenzie Holmes 3, Chloe Moore McNeil and Lexi Bargesser 2 each, and then Lene Beaumont and Lily Meister 1 each. For those of you who are watching on the live YouTube feed, you can see our scroll at the bottom of the screen. And so, Andy, you get to go first.
This one was tougher, I would say, in some regard. I think any of the other 3 high scorers you can make an argument for. I'm going to land on Sarah Scalia at the end. She ended up with 19 points, tied for the team lead with 6 rebounds, led the team with 7 assists, and tied for the team lead with 2 steals. So I guess if you figure hardest working means contributed in the most areas, I guess you could give it to her. I would have no real objection to giving it to Chloe or even to Mackenzie for especially her work in the third quarter. But I lean Sarah just for the variety of contributions that she made across a number of different categories.
Yeah, and let's mention Chloe real quick, because Chloe had 16 points. She shot 6 for 7, 2 of 2 from deep. She was 2 of 2 at the line. Maybe we ought to think about Chloe just because she went 2 for 2 at the line. But 3 rebounds, 3 assists. So and 1 steal for Chloe. But I agree with you, Andy. Sarah was who I was kind of leaning with before you went. And just that the fact that she was she had almost, she 19 points, almost had 3 players with 20 plus points, but she was tied for the lead in rebounds. She led the team in assists. She tied for the lead in steals. And you also look at, she played 33 minutes and was a plus 27. And again, I'll be the first to admit, I like plus minus, but I also recognize that it's a little bit of a flawed stat. So Sarah Scalia is going to get our Grace Berger Hardest Worker Award, and we have a friend here, our co-host, Kathy Amos, who is going to join us here. It looks like from the car on her way back from Lincoln to her home.
Yeah, so we finally made it out of the arena and into our car. So how are you guys doing?
We're doing good, but tell us what it was like at the game, Kathy.
Yeah, it was great. We had fantastic seats. We were right behind the Indiana bench, so it was really fun getting to hear, the coaches and the players really get to talk to each other and see up close and personal how the bench react to everything. And one thing I really noticed in particular, being that close, was how much Chloe actually talks. We've always considered her kind of a quiet leader, but on offense in particular, she was really directing traffic and moving people around pretty vocally today. So that's something I think I'll try to watch a little bit more for to see. Maybe it was just maybe today, or I'm not sure, but it was really good. And, the crowd got rowdy there for a little while, but we took them right out of that with in that fourth quarter. So I just thought that was a fun game. We had a really great time, great experience, nice people in Nebraska too. So just all around, I'm glad we came over for that. So who did you give your game ball to?
Sydney.
Yep, that's who I would have voted for too. So it was a really, really hard one, right? So many people to pick from. So yeah, but she came out on fire, and you could really see that she was ready to go and the whole thing. So just really just an all-around performance. I think one of their best games, for sure, their best game on the road so far this year. If not any other team at the Big Ten, that was probably one of the best road wins, I think, of the Big Ten so far this year.
And Kathy, real quick, or say quick, but just give us your thoughts. Especially, and Andy brought this up in his bottoms line. Indiana or Nebraska had cut the lead to 7, and you kind of got the feeling that the crowd was ready to erupt. Just kind of tell us a little bit of what the feeling was as Nebraska had cut the lead to 7, and that crowd was coming alive. But then IU responds with a Sarah Scalia 3 and a Chloe Moore McNeil steal and layup.
Yeah, you could really feel it, I think, in the stadium there, where the crowd was just ready to actually, they were quite loud. That was probably the point where they were the absolute loudest in the game from, right, except for maybe a tip-off. But the crowd was definitely thinking that they were going to get right back in that game. And then as soon as those 2 plays happened that you mentioned, they just went quiet, and that was it. And I think the crowd was it. You could see the deflation, I thought, on Nebraska as well, where that just seemed to be kind of the end for them in that period. So, but the thing with that for us was how calm I thought all of our players were and our coaches were. They were up by, handily double digits, and then Nebraska makes that run. But I thought we just responded in a very calm and mature fashion. And it really showed, I thought, our, experience from this team in that particular segment.
Yeah. And the other thing, Kathy, what was the IU crowd like?
Actually not too bad. There was a couple, about 2-3 people behind us from Bloomington, drove over from Bloomington. No connections, no family relations or anything. A bunch of Coach Sai's family was there. Since she's not too far, grew up in Des Moines and then coached here as well, or not here, in Omaha. A couple of, I think we saw a lot of Sydney's family again. They seem to travel well, and she's got a lot of family in Iowa. So there was quite a few people there, but it was all kind of concentrated. I didn't know when I bought my tickets that we would be behind the Indiana bench, but so it was just kind of lucky, I guess. But there was a nice showing. I bet you a good, 25, 30 people, which, doesn't sound like a lot, but when Nebraska's crowd got really quiet, we were kind of loud. So it was fun. It was really good.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yep. By the way, you asked about the game ball. Who would you have had for the hardest worker?
Yeah, I would have given that to Sarah then. So Sydney for my game ball and Sarah for hardest worker. So is that what you guys did too?
Yep, you make it unanimous.
Yeah, nice. Good. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to your regular scheduled program, and I'll go listen to you over on YouTube and join the chat mob over there.
Thanks, Kathy. You and Sean, be careful going home.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Take care, guys.
All right. See ya.
So, Andy, we talked about the hardest worker, and hardest it is to believe that was Sarah's first hardest worker award. And a kind of a segment we throw in here, now with Mackenzie, and we call it Mac Watch. she is now up to two. If I'm reading this right, and I'm using Kathy, she's provided. Yeah, I got it now. Tyra Buss record is 2,364 points. After today, Mackenzie has 2,172. She needs 192 more points. She's averaging 19.6, and she'll need to average 17.3 the rest of the way to break Tyra Buss's career scoring record. She had 6 rebounds today, which puts her up to 869 total. She needs 4 more to move into 4th place on the rebounding, or for 6th place. Sorry, she needs 4 more for 6th place on the rebounding numbers. And then she had 1 block today, which puts her at 227 overall. She needs 42 more blocks to get to 1st place on the all-time block shot list for that. So that's our Mac watch for today as she closes in on some longstanding and some venerable records at Indiana. So we're going to swing it over here, and we're going to talk with Andy a little bit about Penn State. And Penn State's kind of a little bit of an interesting team. They're currently number 31 in the net, and they're 10-4 overall, and they're 1-2 after winning their last game at home against Northwestern, which was a week ago, actually. And I think they play maybe today, a little bit later, or earlier in the, if they don't play today, it's a long layoff. But 95-55 on that win. But it's interesting because they're down right now 2 players. Actually, Owusu, who you may remember from actually being at Maryland for a couple years and then transferred out, and now has come back. In fact, she was at Virginia Tech at the end, last year, and now has come back in the Big Ten. But she hasn't played a game at all this year. And there's been some stories, at least before Christmas, that she was starting to participate in some pregame warmups. So it would not be totally, I think, out of hand that you might see her on Wednesday. But then their best player, at least their best returning player, and the person who was their best player this year on stat-wise, McKenna Marissa, went down with an injury against Ohio State back in December and hasn't played since. So, and Northwestern's not one of the better teams in the league anyway. They're going to be 13th or 14th in the league. With that, you look at where we are. Indiana leads the all-time series 33-19. That game, by the way, Wednesday is at 7 Eastern, 6 Central on BTN Plus. Unfortunately, well, hopefully our last game's on BTN Plus. IU's won 6 in a row, 9-1 in the last 10 against Penn State. But Penn State's losses are to USC, West Virginia, Ohio State, and Michigan State, who are all in the top 21 of the current net rankings with that. So, and as we said, McKenna Marissa is their leader. She's averaging 17 a game, but hasn't played since that game in December. Shea Shizeski, a 5'7" sophomore guard, is averaging 16 points a game, 3 rebounds. She's shooting 44% from the field, 42% from 3, and she takes 7 threes a game with 3 others in double figures. Tay Valladay, Leilani Kepenis, and Allie Brigham, who's averaging 6.2 rebounds, which is 14th in the league. So Andy, and I know you maybe don't see much of Penn State, but just kind of give us your thoughts a little bit from what you saw in our little scout tips on the run sheet.
Yeah, it's interesting. It looks like, and I have no reason to believe that the net for the men's is any different for the women's. But if you look at some of the teams that stand out in the men's teams, they've blown out bad teams in a major way. And if you scroll down the list of results for Penn State, you can see they've done the same thing. And that probably explains, a little bit of why they're so high in the net, despite not really having a lot of top end wins. I mean, they've got multiple 50-point wins. They beat Navy by 63 at one point. So they've just got some. I think they beat St. Francis of Pennsylvania by 76, 119-43. Good God. Anyway, so they've got a bunch of huge wins from a margin perspective that's probably pushed their net up to be a little bit higher than what they are. So if you look at it that way, might add a little bit of context to why that number seems a little high based on what they've actually achieved on the court. So, if you look at it that way, you think about the personnel components and how they've fared against other good teams this year. This feels like a game that IU should handle, relatively easily. But you look at they do have the ability to put a bunch of points on the board. Part of that is attempting a lot of threes. So that'll be a point of emphasis for IU. Whereas today, I thought there were times they gave up some easy baskets on the inside. Here, you really got to watch and not let Penn State get hot from the outside. But at home, short of being kind of a look ahead spot for IU, it feels like one they should be able to handle.
Yeah, and Andy, I want to ask you, and for those of you who don't know, listening to our podcast and not as familiar with Andy from his work over in Assembly Call, Andy's one of the best bracketologists out there in the country. And Andy, I just kind of want to ask you, and I know you don't do a women's bracket, but I don't know if you follow the women's bracketology. Charlie Cream is the one I know of the best, but do you or maybe you know some people who do, but I've kind of noticed on the net, in the women's game, there's no quad system. It's just, it's wins, it's kind of road wins and home wins, but they don't really break it down to quad wins like in the men. Do you happen to know why that is, or why they wouldn't use that same system?
Well, I thought they did, so I would probably not be the the best person to ask, I guess. But I do feel like when I looked, I was just kind of messing around with some things last year, looking at it. It did seem like the way they format some of the team sheets is a little bit different as you go through it that way. But I do think they still, I mean, you kind of have to use some way to measure what it looks like. But yeah, Charlie Cream is the one that I, if I'm looking at it, is the one that I would typically look at. But I'm looking at just going to because I have the NCAA site bookmarked where they do this for the men's team. So when I look at their team sheet, it does. They group them differently, but they do still have, I guess, essentially, I guess it's not really quadrants. They just do net 1 to 25, 26 to 50, 51 to 100. I'm not totally sure why that would be. I'm sure somebody who's done more research on it than I have would probably know. I don't know if I'll offer a theory that may or may not have any basis in reality. A lot of what they do with the men's is so the, quad one is, 1 to 35 home, 1 to 75 road. I don't know if it's the crowds aren't quite the same in a lot of women's games, so the road games aren't that much harder. I don't know that I subscribe to that theory. It depended upon, where you go. You'd be hard pressed to tell somebody who watches the IU Iowa game next Saturday that going on a road game there is not different. Is there's not a home court advantage or something of that nature. But that would be my only theory on why it's done that way. But like I said, if you look at the team sheets, it's it just groups it 1 to 25, whether it's home, road, neutral, whatever, 26 to 50, 51 to 100, and then 101 plus. So to the extent that they don't call them the quadrants, but it's still 4 different buckets to put results in. So I guess you can kind of look at that however you want. And then it kind of just looks at a general top 100. But this game today, at least where Nebraska was coming in at 23rd, would be a quad 1 win. It's also one of those where sometimes you play so good, you impact the other team's ranking. And then now it becomes a win in that second bucket, which is probably likely to happen here based on the margin of victory. But we'll see how it goes as they look forward from that. But yeah, the 2 Iowa games, home against Michigan State and at Ohio State, are the other quote unquote quad 1 games left for IU as it stands right now.
Yeah, and I'm only going. Ari's saying in the Workaholics here, our friend Ari, who follows us a little bit closer than I do in terms of some of these net numbers and stuff, says it is really the same system. I just know that when I look at the women's page, it doesn't give, like when you look at the men's in the net, it's quad 1, quad 2 is listed there, but on the women's side, it's just like home win, road win, things like that. So that's why maybe where my confusion came in, that I didn't quite understand how the nitty gritty of it. And I thank you for explaining that for me and for our listeners as well. So we also want to kind of point out here around the Big Ten coming up between now and Wednesday when IU plays again, a couple games of note that we think you ought to keep an eye on. Maryland, and by the way, Maryland and Purdue got postponed yesterday. And Andy, I may not have seen this one in a long time, but Maryland and Purdue were supposed to play yesterday in College Park. If you were happened to watching the Ravens game and the Steelers game, knowing you being the football fan you are, it was pouring down rain in Baltimore, and College Park was getting that same system, and they had a roof leak. And they had water that was dripping onto the floor, and they couldn't quite figure out a way to get it stopped. And they even maybe discussed moving into like an auxiliary facility at the Xfinity Center, like a practice type gym, I think almost, or maybe a smaller gym that they use for some other things. But Purdue kind of was like, I'm not. And and by the way, I would not blame Katie Geralds for that at all. If they'd come to me as a coach and say, hey, you want to go play in this other facility we have here, I would, no. Let's go discuss how we can reschedule this, but I'm not going to go play in, I've prepared for one thing. I'm not going to go play, in another facility. So Maryland and Purdue got postponed. So they're going to have to figure out a way to get that. But I'm not sure I've seen a game outside of like pure out snow, so like snow, storm, keep somebody from being able to play. I'm not sure the last time I saw a game get postponed because of a roof leak.
Yeah, that was, I had not seen that, but yeah, that is a new one. I mean, typically with college basketball, if you're missing games, it's usually travel related because of snow or city shuts down or something of that nature. But yeah, that's a new one. But I would agree with you. I think in that situation, presumably they'd had a shoot around before or something. They'd going into a different venue that's got different sight lines and different things like that. You kind of put the onus on the host to figure out a way to get the game played at the regular venue. Although, depending, you now kind of got to figure out a time where both teams have at least a little bit of a window where you can fit the game in, and that has some ramifications there eventually anyway, where you might be, have kind of a condensed schedule where you got to play a whole bunch of games, in a row or closer together than you normally would.
But as I was going to say, Tuesday, Maryland will travel to Michigan State. Maryland 2-1 in the league, Michigan State 1-2. But Michigan State gave Iowa everything they wanted in Iowa City today, and they play a very up and down style. So keep an eye on that game. Minnesota at 1-2 in the league goes to Michigan at 2-1 on Tuesday as well. And this may be the game where we really, really find out what we know about Minnesota. Minnesota, tough loss in their last game. They had an earlier loss at Iowa, which was no shame in, but they lost their last game out. And so this is a game where I think we really find what's going to, is Minnesota a pretender or are they a contender? And I think that as far as for an NCAA tournament berth, and we'll find out. And then also on Wednesday at about the same time IU's playing, Iowa at Purdue. Iowa 4-0, Purdue 2-1. So that game on Wednesday as well. So just to kind of keep some games on games to keep your eye on around the Big Ten. We're going to throw it over to Andy for his final thoughts here as we get ready to wrap up our episode and let Andy get to kind of watching the Eagles, and I get to watch the Dolphins tonight. Hopefully, win a division. So.
Yeah, I may want to get back on, depending upon how the Eagles play. We'll see how it goes. Keep up their recent play. I'll be clamoring to talk about a successful team. But that being said, appreciate you guys having me today, and happy to fill in for Kathy as she was able to attend the game, which was a great one to watch, and I'm sure an even better one to be at in person. So, I just go back to what I said before. Just the way that this team played is exactly what you would draw up if you want to look at how you want a team to play in a difficult road game. Get out to a good start, respond to every challenge that the other team puts out there, and just slowly and methodically build a lead, pull away, and never really be challenged by the end of the game. Just thought, and even the veteran players that IU had all really stepped up, scored extremely well over that game. And I think that's the perk of having a veteran team is having people who aren't necessarily fazed by going into a tough road environment, as Kathy mentioned, that they just never really seem fazed by it. And the numbers and the way the game played out would certainly support that. And so, just remains a fun team to watch for reasons like that, where you just, you can go in with some confidence regardless of the venue that they've got what it takes to be able to come out. And then they go out on the court and they back it up and play that way.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo those sentiments. It was one of those games as a fan that you and somebody who's coached, but especially as a fan, just to watch a team really execute. Now, again, if we wanted to nitpick, they had 10 turnovers in the first half, but only 4 in the second half. And so I thought the things that they didn't maybe do as well, they got corrected at halftime. Just an enjoyable game to watch. And you finally get the feeling that this team is really kind of starting to gel. I think earlier in the season, Terry Morin said it on a number of different games afterwards in the post-game press conferences. It wasn't to her where she wanted them to be defensively. They weren't communicating. They weren't to that point of trust. I would be the word I'd use with each other on the defensive end. And I think that also leads to offensive end. But here lately, I think, the Illinois game, the Michigan game, even the 2 non-conference games, were sandwiched around Christmas there with Bowling Green and Evansville. But you go on the road to Nebraska today, this team looks like it's really finally starting to come together. And boy, IU fans, if you've been, you haven't had a chance to watch as much this year or just been kind of get back. This team is fun to watch, and they got a tough stretch coming up. Now, Penn State, again, don't want to overlook them. Go to Iowa next week. And so they've got to, if they can make that run through there and come out at the other end, at the end of the day, be 6-0 in the Big Ten, boy, that'd be a big step toward winning the league. So I want to thank Andy for being with us here, and we're going to take get us some Bob Thompson music, and we'll kind of segue on out of here. All right. So again, want to thank Andy for being here. We will return on Wednesday, the 10th, after the Penn State game. That post-game show will be approximately 9 Eastern, 8 Central. And by the way, we are closing in on our 100th podcast. And right now, today was our 96th. So right now, our plan is for the 100th podcast to be on Sunday, January 21st, after the Purdue game. And so that's right now the plan for the 100th podcast for the Doing the Work show. We're really looking forward to that. We've got some things in mind we're talking about trying to do. So we encourage everybody to try and follow along, follow us, whether it's here on YouTube, Twitter, or simply at the Substack, wherever you follow us, we'll try and keep you informed about that 100th episode as we get closer and closer to it. Assembly Call will be on Tuesday after the Rutgers game for their post-game show. Andy, you going to be on Tuesday night?
I think so. I know I'm trying to think. There was one of them I was going to skip next week, but I think it was actually Thursday, which is going to be our 1000th. So I probably will be on it, even though I had maybe not originally intended to do that. But yeah, I'm planning to be there on Tuesday. I believe is one I said I could be on.
And by the way, congratulations to you guys for when you get there on Thursday. We've done 96. I can't imagine 1,000 shows. Just really quick, Andy,
It's a lot of Ryan is really what I would say.
When you first started, could you have imagined it going this long?
No, not a chance. And part of it was some of the number gets accelerated because initially we had just talked about doing post-game shows. Well, eventually came into Assembly Call Radio because somebody had offered us a chance to be on radio in Indianapolis. So we did the Thursday show, and then we kind of stuck with that. So that, fills in some during the off season and things such as that. But yeah, no, I definitely would not have at that point, just kind of starting being relatively new to some of the podcasting just in general at that point, I would not have thought in quite a while that we would have gotten to 1,000, but it's been fun.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I kind of wondered about that, and somebody who's been on with you guys a few times. So there actually was a radio show at one point.
Yeah, there was. Kent Sterling, who I forget which station it was at the time. I think we would record it on Thursdays, and they would broadcast it, I think, on like Friday evenings, and then maybe again on Saturday morning. So we used to have pretty strict. Obviously, with having an hour's worth of radio, you only had so much time that we could fill. So we kind of had more of strict timing on that. But there was one, and then we just really kind of stuck with it at that point because it was a good chance to step back a little bit, particularly in a week like this one where it was like, okay, well, there was just a game the night before. You don't need to rehash some of the other stuff, but you can talk at least a little bit about some of the bigger picture things and stuff like that. So we just kept up with it and kind of became a way to have a standardized time to do stuff in the off season as well, because we had always kind of planned on, hey, this time, this day is when we would be there. And, as you guys know, some of that consistency is what helps to build the audience of, them kind of knowing, when you'll be there and you showing up and doing those things. So that definitely helped it grow. At that point, I forget where in the history that started and when it actually ceased being broadcast on the radio, but we've kind of stuck with at least the Assembly Call Radio thought process since then.
Well, congratulations to you and all the people at Assembly Call for that milestone you'll be hitting on Thursday. So you can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that's youtube.com/@Backhome Network. That's the @ youtube.com/@Backhome Network. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for rigdesign.com, for designing our logos. Also a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you've heard throughout the broadcast. Again, we want to remind everybody that Wednesday night we'll be on again, roughly 9 Eastern, 8 Central. That'll be our 97th podcast, and we'll have our 100th on January 21st. So hopefully everybody will be making the notes of that. And then want to thank all of you for listening, whether it's here on the live YouTube feed or wherever you get your podcast feed from. We'll be back to talk IU hoops with you again on Wednesday. Until then, keep your elbow in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. All right. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you coming in.
Hey, awesome. Anytime.
All right. Hopefully go Eagles. And with that, so
I appreciate it. Hope the Dolphins play well for you as well.
Appreciate that too.
Eagles are already losing, so everything's going great.
Just real quick, I mean, I know you being the Eagles fan you are, and without all the other stuff that goes on around it right now, but I've kind of started listening to the Kelsey Brothers podcast. Have you listened to that?
Yeah, I started. I forget when I started doing it, but I listen to it pretty regularly. It's definitely good insight into him from an Eagles perspective, but just entertaining in general, and their rapport is pretty good. So I'm definitely a listener.
So, all right. Hey, you have a great rest of your Sunday. I appreciate you coming on with us. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Sounds good. You do the same. Thanks, everybody.
See you, everybody.